I'm Mara Webster with In Creative Company, and I'm so thrilled today to be joined by some of the fantastic cast from Netflix's Raising Dion. Today, we are joined by the wonderful Alisha Wainwright, Rome Flynn, and Jason Ritter. And Alisha, I wanted to start with a question for you about your character Nicole, because one of the things that I love in watching her is the way that she always finds her own way to continue moving things forward for herself. You know, every roadblock that she's up against, she always finds the way to kind of move past it. Even if we look at her relationship with Pat and where that ended in the second season, in this season, she's not necessarily in a space of forgiveness, but she's still open to the idea that, Pat might have something of value to contribute and doesn't shut that down. And I was interested in how you get to play into all these interpersonal relationships with your character and always find those beats of kind of where she's looking for that optimism and the space that she can create for herself in that way.
That's a great question. Thank you. I definitely think her relationship with Pat has always had this baseline of he has something that she needs, and he's always creating a space to make himself useful. And I think, that's part of like her forgiveness is in really believing fundamentally that he cares about her son. And I think, what I love so much about the space that she's created around Dion is that everyone is very loving and supportive and nurturing of him. And I think that that's an example of the kind of, it takes a village to raise a kid. And I think this season is a lot about, rather than keeping Dion just for herself and trying to protect him on her own, she's learning that everyone that she keeps in her life are there for a reason, and they're there to help her and support her. So I would say, like, she keeps those beats going by being able to rely on other people and trust other people that they have Dion's best interests and her own interests at heart.
And obviously part of that village in this season is your character, Rome, in coming in as a real mentorship figure to Dion. But I love the fact that he doesn't come in with his own experience, with his own powers, and try to tell Dion, well, this was the way it was for me, and so this is how you should be doing things, this is how you should be thinking about things. And the fact that he really kind of stands back and creates that space for Dion to figure a lot of things out himself. And I was interested in how you worked with the scripts, but also the relationship that you and Josiah developed in terms of this character dynamic to really create that space and freedom that he's giving Dion.
Well, I mean, listen, a lot of it is in the writing, and they left a lot of room for me to interpret and try to figure out what this relationship would look like, with Dion. And it's an interesting one because, his dad not being there and then him not really having that, I guess, male figure or someone that he would look to ask about certain things. So I wanted to just approach it as if, without any kind of preconceived ideas of looking at him as just a kid, because he's obviously gone through things kids normally don't go through. And so I think that he approached him with the understanding that him having powers and understanding that just going through life as a kid is already hard, but he has powers too. So they kind of connected just in that sense also. And I think that his role was really just about trying to give the space to Dion to allow himself to be open to even talking about the stuff, and I think later in the season, he's kind of priding a little bit about asking him about what happens. I mean, as you see, like Dion comes to him first about peer pressure and that kind of thing. And he just wanted to be somebody for him that he could lean on, and I think as an actor, I didn't want to overplay that. I didn't want to try to be a mentorship role, like you should do this or, be stern about anything. I just wanted to be like, hey man, we both here. We respect each other. He looks up to him, but I think he looks at Dion also and is very proud of him and sees how strong he is as a kid, but dealing with everything with his mom and, these kinds of things. So it wasn't as hard. Josiah's he's fun to be around on set. He's still very much a kid, man. And that was the interesting thing. I haven't really worked with kids that often, like very rarely. And so I didn't know what the experience was going to be like, but once we start shooting, it's like we on. But when we off, he's bouncing off the walls, and it's really, it keeps the set very youthful, you know what I mean? Because sometimes this work can be a bit, down and you're like really focused, but I really had a blast getting to know him. And, we hung out outside of work, so I got to know him and know his family. And just so when we were on screen that we could have that chemistry and connect with each other and that it would translate for people to see.
That's really wonderful. And Jason, with your character, so much has happened to him since the end of last season. And I was interested in how you worked to fill in a lot of the emotional landscape of him as a character coming into this season, because he's still trying to reconcile with everything from his past. You know, the fact that he had the crooked energy, and the crooked energy kind of didn't turn him into a completely different person, but emphasized some of the smaller aspects of him. You know, so he's trying to deal with the negative aspects of himself. He's trying to lead himself into a more positive space. But also at the center of that, he had this family with Nicole and with Dion, and that's been stripped away from him to the point of he's in this real isolated space, and literally to the point where he ends up at Bayona and he's being kept in a room by himself. And so I was interested in how you found the emotional landscape of him as a character this season, with all of that being stripped away from him, where he doesn't have a support system and everything that he's trying to reconcile and work through within himself.
These are all such great questions. It's so exciting. Have you seen it, or
the whole season? Yeah.
Oh, amazing. Okay, great. I was wondering. I was like, these are good guesses. Yeah, it was really interesting. It was a wildly different experience from the first season, because the first season I was in it with everybody. I was Dion's pal. I was Nicole's whatever, Johnny on the fly. I don't know what you call it. And it was very different to be in just like a cage, away from everybody. And also I think what Pat hadn't really been dealing with the entire first season, he'd just been sort of ignoring that this thing was going on and just kind of going into it. And it sort of felt like the whole journey has been sort of like a feeling of like there's a bit of an addiction type of energy to it all with this power. And initially he's like, oh, I got it under control. I just got to do like a couple little things. And then it all really like spun out at the end. And to me, it really felt like someone who is trying to clean himself up. And there's like before you get to the final steps or a further step, the initial sort of comforting thing is like, hey, everybody, that was that guy. I'm different. I'm sorry about that, but now I've changed. And it was interesting to sort of see, to keep it in the Pat world. I think he hopes that he apologizes once and then we can all just like get back to normal. I think that his impatience with where people are with him, he's like, well, I know that that I'm sorry. So why isn't everybody just like jumping back on board and understanding that like maybe I'm also a bit of a victim here, So it was fun because the Pat in all of his issues were still in there. It's just now he can't sort of pretend that he's just like the nice guy, the good guy who's like there. And, he really has to have some accountability, which he's comfortable with up to a pretty shallow point. And it was fun to sort of watch him try to navigate this new world where, not everybody likes Pat.
Right. Like you said, he thinks that he can apologize once and that he can control where that path of redemption and forgiveness is. And so off the back of that, Jason and Alisha, I wanted to talk about the space that the two of you found in playing that first scene where they kind of reconnect and see each other for the first time. And these two people who have such familiarity and have such a past and a history with one another of connection, but now are in this like really disparate space with one another. And each of them wants something completely different from that interaction and that dynamic. He's trying to come fully fledged into it, and she's really just trying to push it away and walk away. And so I was interested in how the two of you shaped that scene, and then where you built to from there in each time that they kind of see each other and the walls start to come down with one another a little bit more again.
Well, for me, luckily, the director that was shooting the scenes that we were, where we meet again, Dennis Liu, he directed episodes of season 1, and he sort of created the whole concept. And so it's like almost like family, directing that episode. So it was really fun to be able to like see Jason and work with Jason, and then again work with Dennis kind of all together. And we're just trapped in this tiny room, and I think it's something like there was the initial scene where we meet, and I'm very upset and also very happy that he's in this little box. But then one of my favorite scenes to shoot between the two of us was this like 4-page sort of like going back and forth, trying to figure out, the solution to the problem. And you're it's like a lot of tentative back and forth. I feel like Pat is putting a little bit of a feeler out, a little bit like, what he maybe perceives as an olive branch. And she's just kind of like picking and choosing, based on her perspective, what she wants to hear and what she doesn't want to hear. And I think it keeps him on his toes. And it also like gives her a little bit of the power. I think, when someone has wronged you in such a way, it's like, she's a little bit resentful. I mean, she's very resentful. He did such terrible things and put her life and her child's life at risk, killed her husband. And then now I'm here and you hold the key to potential, like, happy life moving forward. And it's just frustrating. And so I think like underlying all of that, you kind of see their scenes play out, but it was super weird to shoot this season and really not work with Jason that much at all, just because it was so bad what happened at the end of season 1. Story-wise, it doesn't make sense that they would ever be able to get back to where they were.
Yeah. Well, that was one of the interesting things that I thought too, is, this dynamic that happens when you've done something very bad, like kill a whole bunch of people and try to kill someone's child. No, but when you've done something very bad, it's the easiest route is to just kind of run away and just start over. And that is actually what Pat tries to do at first. But then he just does decide to come back. And the road back to winning someone's trust again, when you've broken it, is a long and hard and lonely road. And I think one of the interesting things about it is like, in order to even start any kind of conversation, the rules have to be in place. Like, you're not coming out of that box. So like, if you can accept the boundaries of this rule, I will listen to your words. But, he's starting out on such a small level, and all he can do is try to, with his actions and his words, say, I'm trying to help this time around. I'm, sorry about all that, but it was a real interesting dance because of the egregiousness of his previous act and the huge betrayal of trust. It's really hard to, it was hard for both of us to navigate it, but it was nice because I think just having the history that Alisha and I have of having worked on the whole season together, it's like there is a core of friendship there that, is hard for Pat to see at the moment, but I think, they both sort of feel like this is a person that I cared for at one point, so it was really fun to talk about and navigate all that stuff.
Yeah. And Rome, jumping back to your character, we learn a few episodes in a little bit more about his past, and he ends up opening up a lot to Nicole about having struggled with anxiety, but not having had a word to kind of even fully understand it when he was growing up. And then you have the fact that his power is a physical manifestation of the walls that he's built up around himself. But you also really get the sense that he's a character who has done a lot of work on himself and really worked to find the tools to move forward in a lot of that for himself. And so I was really interested in how you took those aspects into this character, and how for you, he's someone who, faces a lot of adversity, but always kind of looks for the solution within himself first.
Yeah. I mean, listen, this character is seemingly a very polished individual, and so for me, like as an actor, I'm trying to figure out where I can put the cracks in, because everybody has them, And I think early on, you see Tevin, and you're like, this guy was super perfect. Like, he works with the kids well, and so when we start figuring out that he has these anxiety issues, and he talks about being married previously, and you think, wow, you're going through all that, we can't really tell. And I think that allowed him to, as he said, training and running, these things saved him basically. And so he's using these opportunities to be vessels, to, be olive branches to the kids he's working with, like Dion. He's gone through this similar stuff. and then the aspect of, my character and Alicia's, and trying to approach it in the truest way possible. I don't think he's ever really thought about maybe being with someone else until he ran into her at the milk thing, and he's trying to figure out how to approach this thing because he's gone through such a, tumultuous situation before. And I think we just now kind of discovering like how those things in his past have affected him, emotionally, mentally, and he hides it pretty well until he's by himself. And then you see these things kind of unfold when he's in the forest. And, so it's been a fun character to really try to wrap my mind around. I tried to lean into the inconsistencies of the things that really aren't on script. You know what I mean? Like that people feel daily that we don't talk about, and so trying to find those moments and even talking to Dion about his situation, I think kind of earns those moments when we find out early on that he's gone through these certain things. And then he's talking to Dion and you're like, oh, okay, he's not just a guy that has it all figured out. Like, he went through things that guided him to be where he is. Unfortunately, we didn't get to really see, Tevin and Alisha really grow into something because there was obviously other things going on and and monsters and zombies and stuff like that. But when we had those moments, I thought it was really cool. It felt like a very organic place. I mean, you watch it, you want to see these two people figure it out, but like it was cute to see it, and you didn't feel like it was forced or anything. And kudos to Alisha because she really was great in those scenes with me. Made me feel good about everything that I was doing, and very inviting. Jay, you know what I'm talking about, right, Jason?
Kind of, yeah.
Yeah. So,
Pat
was a little different than energy towards Tevin, but
when you're a new kid at school, man, sometimes first day of school is crazy,
Oh yeah.
Our first day, Rome and I working together was that espresso machine scene.
Oh, wow.
And like it was this crazy, I forget why. It was chaotic, but he came in and it was chaos, basically, is the only way I can describe it. Like it felt like there was a lot happening and he was just trying to figure it out. And as soon as I had a second, I was like, hi, it's nice to meet you. We're going to do this. It's going to be great. I'm pretty sure. And like, I don't know. It's like, I think I've noticed about the show, Nicole's romantic journeys are obviously, kind of trickled throughout this season, but that's not primarily what the show's about. I think, as much as we kind of bring it back to Dion is where the show really shines. But it is nice that, season 1, it was more about Nicole kind of like finding herself and finding the possibility of like loving herself again, loving things that she used to enjoy, and she can make peace now that her husband's gone. And even though the romance between Tevin and Nicole, wasn't the primary focus, it was still nice to know that like there was a comfortability between these two people, that they're prioritizing Dion, but they're still like, they still feel safe enough to have like chemistry and flirtations and like tease each other and these things. But, Nicole has a lot of walls up, I think, which are fair. And he just, it's kind of funny. He has these physical walls that manifest from the experiences of his life. And then she has these emotional walls together. And it's both like, they're opaque enough that they can see each other, but it takes a while for it to slowly kind of come down. And then by the end of it, you could tell that they really trust each other.
Right. Yeah.
And Jason, a question for you, because in the first season, obviously with the reveal of Pat being the Crooked Man at the end of the season, there were so many kind of small breadcrumbs that you had to weave into your performance that once the audience found out that reveal completely made sense as this culmination of like, oh, well, that's the reason for this, that's the reason for that, but without giving it away. And so you really had to tread a very fine line of giving clues and playing to it in your performance and yet holding back certain things. And without giving anything away for this season, you kind of similarly have to play to some things that are coming towards the end of season 2 as well. And so what did you learn from the experience of kind of finding that balance and finding that line in the first season?
That's another good question. Yeah, it was really fascinating. Again, a lot of it was in the writing. All the little times that Pat's like, we can lie to your mom. It's not that big of a deal. Like these little sort of moral gray areas that he seems very comfortable in. Like if they don't find out, it's fine. Um, I think Dennis and Carol and all the writers have a really, it's like they have a real sense of all these characters, and Pat just has like a major character flaw, which he just will always have, even if he's trying to be good, even if he's trying to do this. There's a little entitled part of him. There's a little part of him that doesn't see. I mean, he is working at Biona, or he was working at Biona because Mark got him that job. And he's still like, this isn't enough. He just wants everything. He just wants everything. And doesn't see what he has. And he feels like he's being screwed out of, his dream life. And it's everybody's fault but his. And there's just there's elements of that, even when he is learning a little bit, and even when he's on his, he's got his tail between his legs, there's still a little bit of that, like, well, can this all go faster? Can this whole process go a little bit faster, and like me get back to getting everything that I possibly want? And so it's fun to have that. There's this sort of, it was fun in the season that even though Pat is doing everything he can to win people's trust, it's still Pat. And I like that they were playing with in the writing, like, well, wait, maybe is Pat okay now, or is he not? Like, what's going on here? And all of the characters have their different levels of sort of dipping their toes back into the, like, how is Pat okay world? Can we trust him? Was it just this crooked energy? And so it was really fun to sort of lay all this in here of Pat coming back and trying to win people's trust, but still being Pat, being imperfect, messing up sometimes, getting frustrated sometimes, not just being pure, like, I'm an angel now. It creates a dynamic where you're a little bit unsteady about how you feel about him the whole season. And I like that.
Yeah.
I was going to say, like, people also like realize it's been 2 years, but 2 years is a long time to give someone like a check mark of like, that's a lot of time to potentially change.
Yeah.
So it's not unreasonable. It's not like he came back a month later and was like, I'm fine, guys. I did like a crash course in therapy. Everything's really good. Like, no, he 2 years is a healthy amount of time to have some reflection. And Absolutely. I think that lends to like, people having a little bit more faith in him.
Yeah, agree. And lastly, I just wanted to quickly ask all three of you about the way in which the scripts really allow you to take these characters that are placed into exceptional circumstances and find that kind of granular human emotion and connection within them, whether it's a character dealing with anxiety but being manifested through powers, or, how you're trying to protect your son. And even though it's against the most extraordinary circumstances, it's still just a parent looking out for their kid, or having your inner demons reflected in a power that you've inhabited. And was interested in how the scripts always allow you to just find that granular emotion and connection.
So that's what I love about genre. I've been in genre productions for a while now, and I think what makes them so great is that they are reflections of real life things that people experience, but just you heighten the stakes. The world is ending. People are potentially dying. People have powers. Like, that's what I love about genre and this sort of like true land of make-believe. But you can't have that sort of fanciful, magical world if you don't root it in a bit of emotional reality. So, you can take any sci-fi, any fantasy, anything. And when you boil it down, it's about family. It's about friendships. It's about connection. It's about feeling seen. And I think, you can use that and I think that's what makes Carol, our showrunner, so good at what she does, is that everything is rooted in the reality of these people, the reality of their characters. And then I think Tevin's character is a perfect example that his powers have manifested in such a specific way to relate to what he went through. And the same with Aubriana's character. She feels like she's destroying everything. But when you're a teenage girl, you kind of feel like everything's so dramatic and intense. And so it would make sense that her powers are so dramatic and so intense. And, Dion's a little kid, so his are constantly changing all the time because that's what kids do. And you can kind of look at all the powers and kind of blow them up to, or boil them down to their basic character traits of each person. So that's what I love about genre. And I think when it's done really well, you can see the grounded rooting in everything.
Yeah, I don't know if we're gonna get a better answer than that. I'm gonna be honest. That was amazing. Great job. I mean, like she said, I think acting for me, or artistry, is like an imitation of life. And so you want to find those things in the work you do. And this show is a real representation of that, because although there are very extreme things going on, like she says, as you boil it down, it's still about the relationships. It's still about the things that we all can connect to, even if we don't have powers. It's a universal thing that I think this show has been implemented. And even in the first season, that made you want to watch it, because if you didn't have those aspects, I don't know how interesting it would be to just be like, oh, well, yeah, these kids have powers and it's so much about the powers and about these other things. You don't really get to connect with these characters and have any emotional attachment to them to really care. Why would anyone care if anything happened to, Jason or not Jason in real life? We love you, buddy. You know what I mean? But you get what I mean. And so I think that's probably the most important component to making a show like this, is to make sure that it's deep rooted in real issues. And even in the first season, they tackled the racial inequity and things like that. Like they made sure that we keep that present, because even in that world, things like that still happen. And so we want to remind the viewers, yeah, this is really crazy. And people have powers, but it's still a version of reality that you can connect to. So I think it's really cool to be able to play that kind of character. And it's make believe, but to have a character that's still grounded and deep rooted in some values and things that have happened to them are always characters you want to play, whether they have powers or not.
Yeah. I'll just piggyback on those two answers because they're great. I think like Rome was saying before about everybody has these cracks. For me, being Pat, evil is not really like a thing that you can play or access, but I know what feeling selfish is like. I know what feeling like you're not getting what you dreamed of, or what you think you deserve, or these sort of smaller, more self-involved emotions. Like I've experienced all of those things, maybe not to the same degree as Pat has, but I definitely, like Pat, have, and I think a lot of people can relate to, here's the person you present to the world, and here's all the things you're kind of hiding away from people because you think that those things will make them reject you. And sometimes by suppressing all of that stuff, you just make it worse and it explodes. And that's been the joy of this whole show anyway. Like I was saying in one of the earlier answers, is I know what it's like to try to rebuild trust with somebody, or to have really hurt somebody and try to come back. I don't know what it's like to have killed a bunch of people and try to talk to them, but the little grain of reality, you just sort of take your shrink ray and make it giant.
That reminds me of a thing, like an old acting coach told me. He said, if you can kill a fly, you can play Othello, who in the Shakespearean play, he ends up murdering his wife. But basically it's like, if you can understand the sensation of just wanting something to go away, and that knee-jerk thing, extrapolate that in such a big way that you can then put it into playing a character that does bad things. So it's no one's perfect. And I've killed plenty of flies in my life. And you have to find those points in your life that are a little bit uncomfortable, especially, for you, Jason, your character gets pretty dark sometimes, how his mind works. And you have to be able to feel comfortable enough to go to those points and where you probably weren't the best version of yourself,
Yeah, I really love that point. And I think that everything that you were all just touching upon is why the show connects so much. So congratulations on a great second season. And thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.